Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week is Saira Blair. Saira is a member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, and she represents the 59th District, which is the southern part of Morgan County and parts of Berkeley County. She's not only a member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, she's the youngest member and the youngest legislator in the United States. Saira, congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Why did you decide to run for office? I think you were in high school, in Hedgesville High School when you decided, right?
Yes.
How did that happen?
So my father was elected to the House of Delegates when I was about 6 years old. So it's always something that I've grown up, I've been around it, I've seen how it works. And I was always interested, and I always said, you know, one day I want to get involved, I want to make the difference. But I always thought that was going to be 40, 45, you know. And then I participated in a program in high school called Youth in Government. About 300 high school students from across the state went to Charleston. We wrote a bill, we presented in committees, we were on the House floor. Everything that I do now on a daily basis, we did for one weekend. And I was 16 years old. I came home from that. I was sitting in a Cracker Barrel, actually, and I told my parents, I was like, this was phenomenal to see how intelligent these students were, to see how passionate they were about the state, and how upset they were that they felt they were going to have to leave the state of West Virginia after they got their college education or after they graduated from high school in order to find a job because they just didn't see opportunities here. And so I said, you know, I really want to make that difference and I want to do it now.
Okay. And you challenged an incumbent, his name was Larry Kopp, he was a Republican, in the primary in last year. It was last year, correct?
Yes.
The primary last year, and you defeated him 55% to 45%. What was it about that campaign against against Larry Kopp?
It had nothing to do with him. It was just, I felt, you know, this was my opportunity to run and I was going to do it. And definitely had nothing to do with his job or anything. It was, and I said too, if he wins the primary, then I will wholeheartedly 100% support him in the general election.
What were your thoughts going in on whether you're going to win or not?
I obviously did not think that I was going to win easily. I knew that there was a lot of obstacles that I was going to face, and I knew that I was going to have to work really hard if I wanted people to take me seriously and if I wanted to have a serious chance with it. And so yeah, up until the second that the votes were ready, even afterwards, I was like, are you sure all the precincts came in? There's got to be another one. I'm still not sure that, you know, I really won. And so it was amazing, you know, and such a wonderful process. But yeah, I didn't take any of it for granted, that's for sure.
And you did make you put out this, and so that was the primary you won. Then you ran against a Democrat, Lane Deal, and Constitution Party member, Jeff Becker, in the general in November. And you took 63% of the vote. Lane Deal took 30%, and Becker took 7%. We're your constituents. We live in the southern part of Morgan County, and you put out this spectacular 16-page colorful brochure that laid out your positions. One of the things you said in here was you had a bunch of pledges, and one you said, I pledge I will not embarrass the Eastern Panhandle by introducing legislation that secedes the Eastern Panhandle from the rest of the state of West Virginia. Now, that was a direct shot at Kopp because Kopp actually introduced legislation to take the 3 counties in the Eastern Panhandle and to secede from West Virginia and to join Virginia. He says it was just a rhetorical thing, but you said you thought it made him ineffective. How so?
Well, actually, I mean, he did have that legislation, but in the youth and government that I participated in both years, my junior and senior year, students introduced that same legislation. So it was kind of just, and they were all Eastern Panhandle students. So it was kind of not just him, but, you know, a bunch of Eastern Panhandle people that felt that way. But I call myself a West Virginian. I'm proud to be a West Virginian, and I think that we offer a lot to the state. And I think 50 years ago, the rest of the state offered a lot to us when coal mining was so incredible, and we needed the funding from them, and they really helped out. So I think that it's important that we consider ourselves part of the state and realize that if we wanted to secede back into Virginia, that we would be the black sheep and that they would not take us with open arms by any means.
You're also a student at West Virginia University.
Yes.
And what are you studying there?
I am an economics and Spanish major.
Why, and now we talked about a little bit of this before we started the show, why are you studying Spanish? Because you've had you had an attraction to Spanish since you were a young girl.
Yeah, I started taking it my 7th grade year in middle school. I stuck with it ever since. I grew up on an apple orchard in Martinsburg, and you have a lot of people, immigrants that come in and they work on the farm. And so it was very beneficial for me in high school when I was working to be able to interact and have that communication and break that language barrier. And I think that it's going to be an ever-growing language in this country. And so having that skill, being able to further my communication with people is very important to me.
What do you make of the hubbub at the presidential level over immigration and Trump wanting to build a wall and so forth? What people? I want your take on it, but also people your age. How do they see that?
I think when you go to such extremes as that, then it negates the ability to be taken seriously, I think, for people my age. We don't see that as a realistic thing, especially because so many people are expected to know Spanish at my age. And we're basically told if you can't speak any Spanish at all, you're going to have a hard time competing against people in the job market. And so there's always conversation with people my age, with immigration policy, and whether or not we think that their children should be receiving the same things that we are and all of that. But I mean, more than anything, I think that, like you said, it's a lot going on to just create drama almost at this point in the election. And I think that anybody that is elected is going to end up lessening their views a little bit, going back to center, because I think that extremist of building a wall and having Mexico pay for it, I think even Trump knows that that's not realistically going to happen and that there's going to be another way to fix the problem.
Who do you like at the presidential level? Who I saw a picture on your Facebook page where you're supporting Bill Cole for governor. Do you have any senses who you might support for president?
I've really tried to stay out of any primary elections, and especially right now, I think it's really soon. And I like to wait and feel it out because I don't want to give somebody my support and then decide later, that's not actually who I think that I'm going to support, and then have to change my viewpoint later. And I don't want to ever be bound to something like that just because I said I was going to support a person, but even if I contribute to their campaign, they still might not be the right candidate, and I have no problem switching my view and supporting someone else who I think is going to do a better job. So I'd rather wait a little bit longer. To be honest, I really liked Governor Rick Perry, so I was a little upset to see that he didn't have the finances to stay in the election. But
speaking of finances, you have to juggle. Now you're going to run for re-election this year.
Yes, sir.
Although I've seen you say in the past that you're not in politics for a long time. What are your thoughts on that? Is it just going to be House of Delegates? Do you have aspirations for higher office, or do you think you're not going to do it?
So I always tell people 5 years ago, I never would have put myself here. I never would have put myself doing this interview. So it's really hard for me to even say what I'm going to be doing 5 years from now. However, I am a strong supporter of term limits. I don't believe in career politicians. I think it's okay to serve for a few years, maybe take some time off and return to it. But I think one of the biggest problems we're facing today in our government is that people stay for too long and they forget what it's like just to be the average taxpayer working hard in the private industry and having the legislation affect them rather than deciding what legislation is going to affect others. And I think that's an important thing that's lost. People get too caught up in re-election. I actually went and testified in DC a few weeks ago, and it was very disheartening. I was testifying on a panel of all millennials, and we were basically talking about what the federal government could do to protect us. What we saw, it was bipartisan, the millennials testifying, and the congressmen were just very interested in re-election. It was very clear. They would give like a minute-and-a-half long speech with the cameras on them, and then as soon as they were done, they would get up and they would leave the room. We never had more than 7 people in the room at one time, and as soon as they had finished saying what they wanted, what would make a good clip for them in their next campaign, they left the room. And it was very sad to see that they were less genuine than sometimes we would imagine.
what I think most people imagine politicians as not being very genuine.
Yes.
Is that your experience from being in Charleston?
No, and I think the state legislature is not like that. We do a lot better job, I think, and it's a lot more bipartisan than people believe. Majority of the bills that went through this year were bipartisan bills. There was very, very few that were voted on down party lines. And I think, you know, it would be great if people were able to see that more and to see that we're all West Virginians and we're all working for the best. If anything, I think we have issues where the few of us from the Eastern Panhandle are busy fighting those from Southern West Virginia or from the Clarksburg, Morgantown area. I think you see more geographical arguments about where we want funding to go depending on our state, you know, bringing it back home, than you do whether you have an R or a D next to your name.
You're a conservative Republican. Is that your sense of people your age in West Virginia and across the country, that the majority of them are conservative Republicans? Because historically it's been liberal as a young person, conservative as an older person.
Mm-hmm. I think on economic, financial issues, you'll find that majority of the people my age are conservative, especially when you talk to them about things like Social Security and whether or not we think it'll be around. When it comes to mandatory spending, you're going to find that more people my age are a little more conservative with that because they're looking out for themselves. My generation is a very selfish generation. We like to get out what we put in, and a lot of people feel that conservative viewpoints are the best way to do that. When it comes to social issues, my friends vary. You know, I have some that are very far to the left on social issues, and I have some that are very far to the right. But I think you have that really at all ages with
Correct.
Social issues.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the upcoming session. And you have to juggle. By the way, how do you do that? Because you're going to school and the session's January through March?
Yes. Actually, Kayla Kessinger, she is 22. She's a delegate from Fayette County. She's doing the same thing that I am. She's going to school and serving in the legislature. And we always laugh that we have it better off than most of our colleagues, especially for someone like me 5 hours away because I'm from Martinsburg. That commute isn't that great. So I'm able to go to school. I'm in school right now. I take the fall semester, and then I take the spring semester off entirely, and then I move to Charleston, and I live down there throughout the entire session. I'm not married, and I don't have children, and so I'm able to spend more time in Charleston and not have to try to commute back as often. I still come home as much as possible, but that January through March time is wintry, and the 5-hour drive is not so great. So we're able to be a little more selfish and spend more time on our work, and then I return to school for the summer.
Now, you said that you thought that your generation was selfish, and I saw that there's a group, a statewide coalition, an anti-child poverty coalition. They came out with a 10-point legislative program, which you'll probably be facing because they have lobbyists there in Charleston.
Okay.
One of them is they want to defeat the effort of the Republicans, and you're in favor of right to work also. Mm-hmm. Move the state from, according to your map here, a number of states, about half the states are pro-labor states, you call them, and the others are right-to-work states. West Virginia is a pro-labor state. You have it identified here. Mm-hmm. You want to move it into the right-to-work category.
Yes.
The Anti-Poverty Coalition says that if you move West Virginia from a pro-labor state to a right-to-work state, you're going to drive up poverty because it will increase poverty, decrease wages. And you say that, well, businesses aren't coming here because it's not a right-to-work state. And so this is going to be a battle, correct? Is this going to be on the legislative agenda this coming session?
I sure hope so. I think it will be.
And what do you say to the Anti-Poverty Coalition that says, it has one of its 10 points, we want to defeat right-to-work because it will drive the state further into poverty?
The numbers that I've seen, I mean, every study is different, but the few that I've seen have not proven that. Wages have gone up in a few of the states actually because more businesses are coming in because they're becoming right-to-work states. There are a few. Tesla Motors actually, when they were building their new battery factory, had said that they wouldn't choose, out of the 6 states they were running, they wouldn't choose 4 of them in the running. They wouldn't choose 4 of them because they weren't right-to-work states. So it's very clear that businesses are thinking about that when they're deciding where they want to locate. In my experience, I mean, I have friends who work at, say, Kroger's. They're 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And I was asking, are you a member of the union? Yes, I am. Would you prefer if that money didn't come out of your paycheck? And they say, yes, I would. And I was like, do you know what you can do, what your rights are? And they say, no, the only thing I know about the fact that I'm in the union is that I have a hat, and it's probably sitting in the back seat of my car under a pile of McDonald's bags and things. And so it's clear to me that a lot of people should have the right to decide. I don't think we should ever abolish the concept of unions. I think that they have a place, and I think that especially 100 years ago, I think they really had a place and they were very important in our society. But I think that West Virginians are fully capable of making the decision themselves if they would like to join or if they would not like to join. I don't think that it's going to have a direct correlation on the poverty levels.
We're not forcing people to join unions. You're saying if you're working in a workplace that has a union contract, you must pay union dues because you're benefiting from that. It's what's known as the free rider problem. Mm-hmm. If you're part of a union and you're not if you're in a workplace and you're not paying union dues, you're still benefiting from the negotiation of the union. So how are you supposed to overcome that free rider problem that it's called?
Well, a lot of times, from conversations I've had with states who have become right to work, those who have decided to opt out of it are actually making more in their wages because they're getting promoted based on skill level. Now, not everyone, but a few people who opt out are getting promotions, and those who are still members of the union are upset because they're at a cap and they can't move up until everybody else moves up within. And so it's really creating that division there. And as an economics student, I believe in, free market, and that happens even within the workplace, that allow your skill level to decide whether or not to move up. And the biggest argument there is, things like, say, safety, but I believe that that's why we have OSHA to come in and to regulate that. And so there's still an element there, but I don't think that you're going to experience the free rider as much as long as, people are making that decision for themselves, and the employee or employer could lower their wages. They don't have to. So say you're part of the union, you can make that certain wage. Someone who decides not to opt into that program, then the employer is allowed to lower their wage back down because they opted out of it and they're no longer a part of it. And so then that benefit would be something, say, safety, but everybody is going to be receiving that safety regardless because we have people like OSHA that come in to regulate that, which we didn't have before.
The other thing that this anti-poverty coalition says is that we should increase the minimum wage. You're opposed to that. You're also, I saw in your testimony before Congress that you would eliminate workers' compensation, our workers' comp system. Our workers' comp system was developed many years ago as a compromise between businesses and workers. And the compromise was if a worker's injured on the job, the worker cannot sue their employer for that injury. Instead, there's a compensation fund created by the employer so that that worker won't be driven into poverty by the injury. But you would eliminate that. Why?
So it wasn't simply an eliminate workers' comp and have nothing there to replace it. It was actually a very detailed plan that I've been talking with. I've been working on my father, a few other delegates. We've really been, looking into this, but it would be not eliminating it, but replacing it with what I was saying before, that millennials are very selfish, get out what you put in. So instead, they would be paying into their own plan. So say something like a 401k, but a medical savings plan. So they'd be paying into this, their employer would be matching it, and say that they are injured on the job, then they are able to take this out along with a high deductible rate, but they can take this out and be able to pay for their injury. And say that they do not, then they're able to take it out when they retire. If they live a very healthy lifestyle, then they're able to take this out and use it later on. So it works in a form as a backup savings, because we also believe that Social Security might not be around for us. And so
would you do the same, by the way, for Social Security? Would you privatize it in some kind of savings account?
I'm not really sure. I talked about it a lot when we were at the hearing. There was a lot of great ideas. All of them still have flaws, obviously, because if we had the right answer, then we would have already moved there. And so I do think that that could potentially be something. I'm not really sure. I wish I knew the answer, but I really don't know the best way to do it.
It's, just stepping back a little bit, I'm wondering what your thought, now you're a member of government now. I'm wondering what your thoughts generally on the purpose of government. What should be the purpose of government?
They should be there almost as a structure and then as a safety net. I think we're getting to a point where government is becoming too involved in our lives. I don't think government was ever supposed to be as existent and as talked about and as relevant in our lives as it is now. And that really opened my eyes when I went to DC and I saw just how much of the federal budget went towards mandatory spending, and that it's leaving little room to help things like they were talking about the STEM field, and how we don't have enough money because there's so much mandatory spending to invest in creating new STEM jobs and research. And to me, that's something that I think that the government should be helping, allowing people to pay into it, in order to help grow things that they can't without a united government. At the state level, I think our government's doing an okay job. I think it's still, in our lives a lot, but more than anything, I think the federal level has overreached their boundaries, and I think they should draw back a little. But I do think it's very important. I think the military is very important and one of the key aspects of having a government. And infrastructure, that's something very hard to do at a private level.
When you were talking about mandatory federal spending, you meant Social Security, Medicare, not military? Because military is mandatory federal spending also.
Yes. Well, partially, I wish I had one of the pie graphs with me that they gave, but it's very overwhelming how much comes out from Social Security and Medicare. That makes up such a large portion of the pie graph that you really wouldn't think that until you saw the picture.
What would you do about Medicare? We talked about Social Security, but these are mandatory expenditures, and military, these are mandatory expenditures. What do you do about it?
I really don't know the answer. I wish I did, like I said before, because if I did, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be sitting in DC trying to get them to fix it.
But for example, you mentioned, so the purposes of government as a safety net. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you mentioned was occupational safety and health. And so that's a government mandate. Mm-hmm. The government must come in and enforce the law to protect workers, and you're okay with that. Mm-hmm. What about you say you favor alternative energy, and there's a big push around the world, not just here in the United States, to move away from fossil fuels towards alternative energy. We don't have coal or natural gas in the Eastern Panhandle, but you say we've benefited from it. Why not move toward cleaner energy, just a massive 25-year campaign like Germany's doing to push the country away from fossil fuels towards alternative energy?
So I am a friend of coal. I do believe that there's going to be better alternatives in the future. I'm very confident that my generation is going to create the energy efficient, but also economically efficient. And that's the key word, that we simply can't afford to keep the lights on right now without using fossil fuels. If there was a better, faster, quicker, cleaner way around it, we would already be doing it. But right now, it isn't there. And so I really do believe that we should utilize the resources that we have, which are fossil fuels, until this new energy source comes that we truly can utilize in an efficient manner. So I do want to go towards that. I don't know that it needs to be so forced, I guess you could say. Really have no problem in waiting for another country like Germany to develop themselves and we try to implement it. I mean, that goes against the American, we're first and we're the most creative, but I don't think our government should be funding that. I think we have other priorities that we need to be worrying about our people more and realizing that we do have an energy source available and we need to just utilize that first, and in time, new technology will arise for us.
A lot more to talk about, and I want to, hopefully you can come back, but just in the final minute, give us a little horse race about the upcoming election. Who do you hear? Any Republican challenger in the primary, or who do you hear is going to run against you in the general?
I haven't heard anything yet. We'll see.
But you're starting your fundraising now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again for coming in. It was a great conversation. I hope you agree to come in again sometime down the road. Yeah. And until next week, I'm Russell Mokhiber, and this is This Week in Morgan County.